Welcome to Genesis Unleashed, where we unleash the truth of Genesis.
We asked 15 questions of evolutionists. Today's is, why is natural selection taught as if it were evolution?
Welcome back to Genesis Unleashed. Today we're going to talk about question 4 in the Question Evolution Flyer. Question 4 has to do with natural selection.
Right.
All right, here's question 4. Why is natural selection a principle recognized by creationists as taught as evolution, as if it explains the origin of the diversity of life? That's the question. Here's the more detailed explanation. By definition, it is a selective process, selecting from already existing information, so it is not a creative process. It might explain the survival of the fittest, why certain genes benefit creatures more in certain environments, but not the arrival of the fittest, where the genes and creatures came from in the first place. The death of individuals not adapted to an environment and the survival of those that are suited does not explain the origin of the traits that make an organism adapted to an environment. For example, how do minor back and forth variations in finch beaks, it's going back to Darwin, right, explain the origin of the beaks of the finches? Or does natural selection, or how does natural selection explain goo to you evolution? And the web link that's included in the flyer here is creation.com/defining terms with a dash in between the defining and the terms, and so you can look for more information there, more details.
Right. So we've made the categorical statement that demonstrating some example of natural selection, that's not demonstrating evolution in action, because there's no new genetic specifications created through the process of natural selection. And yet we hear this all the time. I remember being in school, I equated evolution with natural selection, as in if they showed an example of natural selection, well, I was convinced, well, there you go, there's
right,
proof of evolution.
The biggest difficulty with this particular problem is a confusion of terms. Right. Evolutionists call natural selection evolution, and they call goo to you through the zoo, they call that evolution as well, right, from microbes to microbiologists and so on. They refer to both of those as natural as evolution. Mm-hmm. Sorry. Now, natural selection we agree with. Creationists wrote on natural selection long before Darwin. In fact, right, when Darwin was on his round-the-world journey on the Beagle in the 1830s, he got a paper by Edward Blythe, right, a creationist, on natural selection.
Right.
And that was published 24 years before Darwin, within a biblical context.
Right. So an evolutionist is saying, what, you guys believe in natural selection? It's like, yeah, we thought of it first.
It's a big surprise often to many, right, atheists and many folks who don't really know what biblical creationists believe.
Right. So now we did get a couple of rebuttals.
We did, yes.
So you want to do number
Sure.
1 there?
Yeah, the first one is, it's disingenuous for creationists to claim to accept natural selection and not macroevolution, since the cumulative effect of the former leads to the latter. That's the response that we got to the 15 questions.
So evolutionists commonly use microevolution and macroevolution. We don't tend to use those terms because it's, if you say you believe in microevolution, people say, oh, you believe in evolution, and things like that. But this is commonly...
It's confusing to use micro and macroevolution unless you really know what you're talking about.
Right. And so, the problem is there isn't one undisputed case we have out there of natural selection, the process of selecting from genetic information that's already there, creating some kind of new structure or function or feature that wasn't in the genetics of the creatures you're studying beforehand. And that's what evolution needs to explain.
That's right.
If you're going to go from something like a bird-like or a lizard-like creature to a bird-like creature, you have to explain how new structures like feathers, new capabilities like muscles to produce flapping motion, the ability to migrate, that's like a computer program in the brain of a bird that's not in a lizard.
Yes,
that's what evolution would need to explain.
All of the amazing abilities of living things that you see, yes, on just about any nature program, it's not disingenuous for creationists to separate those two things. one does not lead to the other. We've got example after example of natural selection on our website. You can go actually to the Q&A page. We've got a whole many articles on natural selection, and you can look up some of those articles that we ourselves are happy to call natural selection.
And we agree with. It's part of the creation model, actually.
Right, but it's not evolution. Right. And we point that out in those articles that you can have a look at for more details.
Right. So the takeaway point is natural selection does not create new information. It's only selecting from information that's already there. And high-profile evolutionists have themselves admitted this and recognized this for a long time. So it's actually a trap if you're an evolutionist to use this argument, because high-level evolutionists have discarded it. To be honest. There was actually a conference in 1980 at the Chicago Field Museum of Natural History, and the whole topic of the conference was macroevolution. And
how much evidence there is for it, or
right,
isn't for it.
And Science magazine actually covered the reporting and stuff like that, but there was a guy named Roger Lewin who covered and reported on this, and one of the quotes from this, we'll put it up, is from the conference was this: "The central question of the Chicago conference was whether the mechanisms underlying microevolution, so that's natural selection, can be extrapolated to explain the phenomena of macroevolution," means large-scale evolving from one creature to another. "At the risk of doing violence to the position of some of the people at the meeting, the answer can be given as a clear no." So microevolution, natural selection, does not give rise to evolution, large-scale evolution.
Right. And even evolutionists admit that.
Right. Francisco Ayala, associate professor of genetics at the University of California, he was quoted in the same article as saying this: "I am now convinced from what the paleontologists say that small changes do not accumulate." So these changes due to natural selection do not accumulate and cause large-scale evolution.
Right. So to summarize, yes, there are changes, and some of the changes are even very large, but those changes don't lead to evolution, and even leading evolutionists agree with that.
Right.
So we got another, a second answer, or attempted answer to this, one of these 15 questions. This one on natural selection, here it is. This person wrote in, "There are over 100 new mutations for every child born. It is inevitable that evolution would happen with this rate of mutation. Those with the best mutations survive and reproduce."
This was a surprising answer. I
read this and thought, wait a minute here. There's a fundamental breakdown in this person's understanding of what mutations do.
Right.
And we've done shows on this before. Mutations delete and destroy the genes, the DNA.
Yeah.
They don't add anything. They're never going to lead to evolution.
They corrupt them because it's a genetic copying mistake in the DNA letters. That's what a mutation is, whatever form that mutation takes. And it's interesting because we're talking about natural selection, and they're going back to mutation. So it was kind of interesting their answer. But we've noted this mutation rate before. We've done shows on it. We know about the 100 mutations per per generation.
Yes.
But this is a huge problem, because as you're swapping these letters around through mutation, it's like rust on a car. Even if the mutation doesn't cause a problem, even if it's not damaging to the organism, you're still changing these little letters over time, and those changes are going to accumulate. The other problem is how do you account for supposed DNA similarity between, let's say, chimps and humans, because we shared a common ancestor, if you believe that there's been 100 mutations per generation for 3-point-something million years? How could there be any similarity left if there was 100 mutations per generation for that long?
Yeah,
it actually huge. Breaks down.
Those mutation rates, they're the leading human population geneticists, from which that number 100 new mutations per person per generation comes from, that this person obviously knows of. All of the leading human geneticists agree that humans are degenerating.
Right.
We're not evolving into something better. And when they are asked, how can this possibly support evolution? This relatively recent finding in genetics, a massively high mutation rate in humans. All of them, the answer currently is,
we don't know.
We don't know how that's going to support evolution. It's a massive problem for evolution. And we actually interviewed a leading population geneticist, Dr. John Sanford, the inventor of the gene gun. You can watch that interview or excerpts from it if you go to creation.com, one of our other Genesis Unleashed programs, creation.com/GU-Sanford1 and Sanford 2 in particular.
Right.
2 programs there.
Now, if you're an evolutionist or you just want more information on this, from a well-known evolutionist and somebody who's high level that's studied, Dr. John Endler is an evolutionist. He's no slouch in the academic community. He was actually born in Canada. He's got a PhD from Scotland's Edinburgh University. And his research, and of course he's an evolutionist, and so as a biologist, as his research comes out, people like Richard Dawkins, famous atheist and evolutionist promoter, quotes Dr. Endler's research as proof of evolution.
Favorably.
Quotes him very favorably.
He's being quoted by evolutionists.
Yep. He's a brilliant scientist, etc. And he's written the book called Natural Selection in the Wild. Now, it's actually really refreshing to read it, even as a creationist, because Dr. Endler really goes into detail on defining terms, which is what the challenge here is with when people not understanding natural selection isn't evolution.
Part of the problem.
Yeah. So just some of the quotations from his book, which will give a little clarity here. He said, a major problem in this subject is that there is a multiplicity of meanings for the same terms, and the same terms mean different things to different people. This often leads to confusion in the literature. Natural selection must not be equated with evolution, although the two are intimately related. Now, that's straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. He's saying natural selection is not evolution. Now, he would believe as an evolutionist that the mutations that arise that we haven't observed, those mutations that cause new structures, natural selection will select the best ones out. But the selection process, natural selection itself, is not evolution. He's stated it quite clearly. He says natural selection is common enough in natural populations to have been detected in a wide variety of organisms, and strong selection is not as rare as has been previously assumed. Natural selection is therefore likely to be important in evolution. However, natural selection does not explain the origin of new variants, only the process of changes in their frequency. I mean,
we would agree with that.
Okay,
natural selection produces changes in living things. That's right, but it's not the type of change that's going to lead to evolution over millions of years.
To put this usage into broader perspective, those who restrict natural selection to phenotypic selection also call natural selection, as defined in this book, evolution. Those who are more careful call it evolution by natural selection. But evolution is more than merely a change in trait distributions or allele frequencies. It also includes the origin of the variation. So he's agreeing with exactly what we discussed earlier.
Sure.
You're not explaining the arrival, you're just explaining the survival of the fittest. He goes on, evolution may be defined as any net directional change or any cumulative change in the characteristics of an organism or populations over many generations. It explicitly includes the origin as well as the spread of alleles, variants, trait values, or character states. So he's saying if you're going to talk about evolution, you have to explain the new information, the new character traits, right?
Right, which of course natural selection doesn't produce.
Right. He goes on, population geneticists use a different definition of evolution, a change in allele frequencies among generations. This meaning is quite different from the original. It now includes random as well as directional changes, but it does not require the origin of new forms. In other words, whether the change goes uphill, downhill, or just back and forth aimlessly, it is all called evolution by population geneticists. Unfortunately, the use of population genetics definition often results in an overemphasis on changes in allele frequencies and an underemphasis, or no consideration of, the origin of the different alleles and their properties. Both are important in evolution.
Isn't that interesting? That's sort of what we've been trying to point out for many, many years, decades
Right.
in fact. The differences between talking about natural selection that has been observed and that we can see and that
Right.
everyone agrees with, and the story of evolution from something very simple like a bacteria to something more complex like a horse over millions of years.
Right. And many Christians, they say, listen, these guys are scientists, they're brilliant. When we see quotes from scientists saying we've observed evolution, how can we not trust them? They're scientists, they're brilliant. But if they're using a wrong definition, or you see something in a popular magazine, let's say National Geographic, interesting magazine, great pictures, interesting information. But I'll give you an example. National Geographic, June 2002. front cover, it said from wolf to woof. And they showed the picture on the front. You can see it here of a wolf, and then a little whatever that thing is. I guess it's still a dog. And it says the evolution of dogs. Now, interesting that they use the word dogs, and they're showing both a wolf and a little mutant.
Right. Oh, be careful now. Be careful.
I've got a dog like that, so I can abuse this thing.
But it's well understood that today's over 650 varieties of domestic dogs, the dogs that you'd have in your homes, came from a wolf-like variety several hundred years back.
Right. Evolutionists have admitted that they've traced the mitochondrial DNA, and that you can all tell that these dogs all come from wolves.
Yeah, and that's not. That's fairly widely known, but not everyone knows that, so it looks like National Geographic's trying to spread the news.
Right. So you look at the two dogs, you say, look at the change that's happened here, and then they call it evolution. But an interesting quote from their own article. They said, genetic studies show that dogs evolved, see, they use the word again, like Dr. Endler said, right? They evolved from wolves and remain as similar to the creatures from which they came as humans with different physical characteristics are to each other, which is to say, not much difference at all. Well, wait a sec. If you've got a person from Africa, you've got a person from Europe, you've got a person from whatever, we're all people. And they're saying the same thing. Yeah, but these wolves, these different dog variants we have, they're all dogs. They remain as similar. So the Bible says that God created kinds of creatures to reproduce after their own kind. It doesn't mean they're going to be clones. They're exactly the same. There's variation, but that's not evolution. Interesting article from thestar.com. In the article it said, is it a coyote? Is it a wolf? Yes and yes. It's a coy wolf. The predators that are plaguing Durham region are showing up in urban areas appear to be an emerging species resulting from wolves and coyotes interbreeding. The larger, highly adaptable animals have the wolf characteristics of pack hunting and aggression, and the coyote characteristics of lack of fear of human-developed areas, says Trent University geneticist Bradley White, who's been studying the hybrids for 12 years. We're seeing evolution in action, he says.
Evolution in action. It's a great example of natural selection, and
that's right.
Not even, it's really breeding within a kind.
That's right.
It's not even a good example of natural selection.
That's right. But here again, Bradley is obviously a scientist. He's well studied. He's probably a very brilliant person. He's using terms like we've seen evolution. Christians sometimes go, "Oh, well, these experts they've seen it."
But again, there's that equivocation between natural selection and evolution. He's seeing not even natural selection, but he's calling this evolution.
That's right.
The mixing of these two kinds
so you
of
take
dogs.
A coyote plus a wolf, you get a coy wolf. That's evolution in action. It's not a good analogy.
It's like a salad bar, isn't it? That's how natural selection operates. You can go up to a salad bar and select any variety of salad you want. You can go up there, if you're really hungry, thousands of times and have every time a little different variety of salad.
Right, because of what's
beans,
there.
Coleslaw and whatever they have.
Yeah.
But if there's no pizza in the salad bar, you're never going to have pizza. It doesn't matter how many times you go and select and select and select. Natural selection can only select from what's already there, just like the salad bar analogy.
That's right. Now, creationists, sometimes we have a portion on our site that says arguments we feel creationists should not use. And sometimes I'll have well-meaning Christians, at a seminar, and they'll say, yeah, but evolution, it's just a theory. And we get criticized, right? People will say, well, see, you guys just aren't educated. People call evolution a theory, but they're, because there's two different meanings for theory. There's a scientific theory, which is what evolutionists say evolution is.
Right.
And then there's just a theory like, well, I have a theory it's going to be rainy tomorrow. And so we get
very different usage there.
We get criticized for equivocating, for using different meanings to the same phrase. It's the same thing. Natural selection is not evolution.
We've attempted to clarify the difference between natural selection and large-scale evolution here on this show. This is a summary. We didn't intend to go into all the details. You need to go to creation.com, especially the section on natural selection. We'll put that link up again. Go there, read some of the articles that we've commented on.
Right.
On where evolutionists have said, look, this is evolution in action. We're seeing evolution before our eyes. What are they actually seeing? Have a read of those articles, and we'll see you next time.